Our text today is taken from the 12th chapter of Revelation, beginning with verse 1. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. And there was another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads. And his tail drew a 1/3 part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. Chapters 4 through 11 take us from Pentecost to the end of the world. The rest of the book of Revelation is taken up with subjects that have been either covered in the first 11 chapters but not discussed as thoroughly, or in introducing other subjects that are comprehended in the ear of the church in this world, but that in the mind of God need more thorough examination and explanation. In this particular instance, John sees a vision which is startling. A great wonder appeared in heaven. Well, there are several words in the Greek language which are translated wonder. This particular word has some unique properties. Now, other words have more to do with the thought of being amazed or something that is marvelous. This word focuses on the sensational. A great, wonderful sign appeared in heaven. Well, we would not want to strip this verse of its startling quality. The sensational is there and is something that was very evident and instructive as John saw it. Still, the whole lesson does not vest in the symbol itself. It is a startling event that teaches. It has a message to it. Now, what John saw by any reasonable Orthodox interpretation was a vision of the church. This is generally agreed to by men of all persuasions. I say generally. Now, there are a variety of interpretive approaches as to what is comprehended in this view of the church, but for the most part it is acknowledged, and it is certainly the position of Historic Orthodox Christianity, that this is a vision of the church. When John saw this particular scene, he was amazed. Something about it took him by surprise, and it startled him. Well, what do you suppose that was? Consider for a moment the Apostle John as he carried out his ministry, as indeed did St. Peter, St. Paul, and others of the early leaders of the church. In worlds which were very different from what we have made them out to be in contemporary religion, they spent days, weeks, and months walking along dusty trails, trying to get from one town to another, living lives which were very demanding and difficult, and getting very little encouragement along the way. And this is not how we usually see the apostles. We think of them as men to whom the whole town came out, falling down before them and giving them great recognition. Well, according to the biblical account, it happened that way on occasions, but if you go back over it and you read it carefully, you'll find that most often the town leaders showed up and beat them, threatened them, or stoned them. Then they were led, dragged, or pushed to the outskirts of town and told to keep on moving and to not come back. These were the stalwarts and the founders of the new Christian movement. They carried out these assignments, acknowledging and believing that Christ's teaching was that this is the way it was to be, and that this was the only important life to live, and this was a mission that must be fulfilled. They walked by faith and not by sight, wondering where the glory was. Where is this great kingdom? Where is the evidence and the reality of all these things Jesus taught that we were committing ourselves to? John himself in the Isle of Patmos, maybe there as a sentence, maybe as a missionary, was in either case undergoing much hardship for the cause of Jesus Christ. Now he sees a scene from the divine point of view. From the throne of God, he gets God's view of the church. And what does he see? And it was something very different in the eye of faith than that which we have experienced in this world, well, that which he was experiencing in this world at the time. He sees a glorious, a magnificent, and a beautiful woman, clothed with a gleaming garment as brilliant as the sun. On her head was a great golden crown, adorned with 12 stars. So high, magnificent, brilliant, and lofty was she that the moon was under her feet. Now, if one studied all the biblical references to the moon, he would see that the moon, in contrast to the sun, represents the light upon the earth as opposed to the light in the heavens. What we see here is the earth beneath the feet of the woman. In other words, we see the glorious picture of the bride, the church, in relationship to Christ, the groom, reigning as sovereign with the crown upon her head. She is gorgeously apparelled in a garment that represents the purity, the holiness, and the beauty of heaven. She is ruling over the earth. We must understand that when we talk about ruling over the earth, we are talking about rulership from God's point of view. Go back to the days of Jesus and the Pharisees. There was a difference between what Jesus considered the kingdom and rulership to be and what those religious leaders had in mind. Oh, indeed, they were waiting for the Messiah, the King of the Jews. Their standard answer to their friends, to the Romans and the Herodians was, "You just wait till our king shows up. He'll come and throw these Romans out of our city and our country, and we will rule this world, this whole world. We will absolutely be in control of it." God promised Abraham that Messiah would reign over this earth and that we would reign with him. And that was their expectation. And then one day, their king showed up, meek and lowly and riding on a jackass. He began teaching things that they had always disdained and thought were beneath them in their misguided sense of self-importance. They looked at Jesus on that jackass and they said, "Oh, no, 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 no. This is not what we want. This is not it. We have not waited all these hundreds of years for this. This is the hope that we have hung on to, for which we have kept up our spirits and labored and toiled. Not for this, for heaven's sakes. This is simply not the Messiah. This is not it. It can't be." He came unto his own, and his own received him not. But do you know what? Jesus, now listen to me, Jesus was the king of that nation. Oh, yes, he truly was. People say, well, he would have been their king if they had received him, and someday they'll receive him. Oh, no, Jesus was King of the Jews. It was their privilege to reject him if they wanted to, because that's the way God works and has always worked and always will work. God is not a slaver. He never imposes his rule upon anyone who does not want it, and he never will. Always in God's rulership, willing people will be involved, and that is in part why you see things going the way they are in this world today. Even though they're contrary to the values of God and his law, God will not destroy man in the process of trying to deliver him. He will let him go on as long as time goes on. He will not take the free will from them until the day of judgment, till this mortal experiment is over. So long as the earth goes on, and man upon it, it is incongruous with anything that God has ever done to capture the spirit of man and force him against his will to conform to the will of God. God's not going to do it. If he was going to do that, he would have done it a long time ago. Now, certainly God has laws. He also has enforcers. In some senses, there are consequences for breaking those laws in the present time, but all of that notwithstanding, God does not force his rule upon people. Even so, God has the authority and the power and the kingdom. At the trial and crucifixion of Jesus, Pilate was divinely instructed to put a sign over his cross saying, "This is Jesus, King of the Jews." Well, the Jews said, "Don't put that up there. We don't want it there. He's not our king. Away with this man. You take him. Take that sign down. Or if you're going to leave it up there, put it on it that he said he was our king, not that he was our king." But Pilate said, "No, I will not take it down, nor will I change it. What I have written, I have written." Jesus Christ was crucified under the title that God insisted be put over the cross and over his head. "This is Jesus, King of the Jews." Somewhere in the thinking of religious men today, as with the Pharisees so long ago, there's a notion that we can throw him out. They will not accept his reign in this world, and that will prevent him from being king. They will not take his kingship on the basis that he wants to offer it. Therefore, he goes away. There's nothing else he can do. He's going to come back again, but when he does, he will yield to our pressures and our demands. He's going to rule the way we wanted him to then and the way we want him to now. If he'd done that, he would have not been rejected the first time. He's going to rule in a stifling political dictatorship. He's going to so dominate people that they will not even be able to think, much less express the evil that is in their hearts. My brothers and sisters, this is a fanciful, imaginary, false invention of the imagination. Let me tell you, as God is my witness against the day of judgment, it is not going to happen. It is not going to happen. It is not going to happen. Jesus was their king. Jesus has always been king. There is never a time when he has not been king. Every place Jesus is, he is king. And every place where Jesus Christ rules as king, the same values and the same kind of rulership that was expressed in those days of Galilee will prevail. It will prevail. As for these fanciful notions of Jesus' future kingship and kingdom, They tried to take him then and make him king in a political way, that they wanted him to be king, and he wouldn't let them do it. He hid himself from them. Still, he was their king. He continues to refuse that earthly, humanistic concept of ruling as a king, and he continues to hide himself from those who have that in mind. But he is king, and he has a kingdom. In the same sense that Jesus was their king, the church, as God's agency in this world, is ruling over this world, just like Jesus was ruling it over then, and they didn't know it, and they thought they prevented him from it. Oh no, he was king of the Jews. So Jesus Christ, through the church, is ruling over this world today. It's not as man sees and understands and desires rulership, but it's as God understands it, because God's rule has to do with truth, righteousness, the law of God, the moral and spiritual values embodied in that law, and with behavior that manifests love and appreciation for and submission to the holy and righteous Creator, God, our Savior and our friend. That is the nature of rule and authority. And in the true church, now we're not talking here about the world of religion. You must understand that the world of religion has most often been a part of the kingdoms of this world. And few there be, Jesus said, in that world of religion who understand the rule of God and seek it. And in the true church, these values are honored, they are taught, they are lived by, and they are expressed. The true church of Jesus Christ exists wherever there is death, burial, resurrection, new life, new character, expressing as original man did not and could not, the truth of God, the law of God, the life of God, and the love of God. That, in the ultimate sense, is the only true kingdom and rulership that there is in this world, or that there will ever be here in this world of the fallen creation. In God's program with man, the purpose of redemption is to establish finally and forever that kind of rule with man upon the earth. The meek shall inherit the earth, and in the final analysis, when it's all said and done, then shall the righteous shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. And when this righteous rule of God has finished destroying every enemy, the final enemy, which is death, will be destroyed by the second coming and the resurrection. In that act, and with that destruction of death, will come the destruction of the old creation, according to St. Peter, 2 Peter chapter 3, and the birth of the new heavens and the new earth. You see, the death, burial, resurrection, new life, everything functions by it. You may say that you do not believe that. My friend, it doesn't make any difference whether you believe it or not. It will happen. It will happen. Oh, but it will happen. The truth will win out. The light will prevail. The righteous will live. The wicked will die. This is the way it's going to happen. And because that's the way it's going to happen, that's the way it is happening, even though often to the foolish mind of fallen man, it doesn't appear to be that way. Because John lived in this world of fallen mortals, and because his walk was one of faith and not sight, what he saw in this world as he went along was a very different picture from the church in this world as God sees it, from God's point of view. And this is for our instruction. It is to tell us what, from the throne of God and from the heavenly point of view, is happening, and how it really is with the church in this world. Remember again, in that regard, that we walk by faith, not by sight. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth, and pain to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads. Now it goes on to say that this dragon tried to prevent the birth of this man-child, but could not do it. When he could not prevent the birth, he tried to destroy the man-child. The dragon could not do that because the man-child was caught up into heaven. Then the dragon tried to destroy the woman. I'll explain to you exactly what's going on here, but first we want to come to grips with 2 things that are introduced immediately. We just said that this is the church in her glory, a magnificent and wonderful thing. Now we see that the woman cries and travails in pain, desiring to be delivered. Is this not incongruous? How can there be glory when there is crying and travailing of pain? It can be because the redemption of mortality is suffering for the kingdom of God. The purpose of the church in this world, illustrated by the woman in the family relationship, is to travail in birth, to bring children into the family of God and raise them to maturity. That is the church's glory, just as it was the woman's glory. This was spelled out immediately after the fall in the Garden of Eden, when God said to the woman that he was going to greatly multiply the instances of her conception, and in pain she would bring forth children. This was not only a curse, but it was the good hand of God in implementing a means by which the life, the soul, the 2 being the same, would be redeemed back from the death that would have otherwise claimed it. This is the purpose of the bride. It is to travail in birth, to bring life into the family and to raise them to maturity. That is indeed, it is indeed the glory of the woman. Embodied in this imagery of the woman representing the church is the basic purpose of the church. It is through the suffering of the church that Christ should be born into this world. Now, this is not only talking about the Old Testament program where Christ was born into this world through the nation of Israel. It's not only talking about the Virgin Mary giving birth to the Christ child. It's not uniquely talking about the individual new birth. This is talking about the whole program of God and the gospel in this world. Christ and the new creation are born into the lives and the souls of the people who hear the gospel through the travail of the church. That is, the people who hear it and believe it. In this way, children are born into the church, and through travailing them in birth again, they are raised to maturity. How are people going to be born again? How are they going to find Christ? I mean, really find him. I'm not talking about neo-evangelicalism. I'm talking about Orthodox conversion. How is it going to happen? How does this new birth process take place? It happens through the intercourse between the bride and the groom, and the travailing of the bride in birth until the children are born. Children cannot be born unless the woman suffers the pains of childbirth. Now, you may say that this is true in natural families, but it's not true in the spiritual family. Oh, but it is. Oh, yes, it is. In the spiritual family, as with the natural family, travailing must take place before birth can be accomplished. Now, the religious world has changed things around, redrawn the lines, re-imparted meanings to words. Prosperity preaching has plagued the religious world with a get-rich-quick mentality where everybody can have everything and nobody has to put anything out to get it. My brethren, it doesn't happen that way. Even if it could, there would be no glory in it, but it cannot. The truth is that for life to be brought into the family of God, the true church of Jesus Christ must suffer. This is where the true glory and achievement and fulfillment of the children of God resides.